Okay, welcome everyone to Daf Yomi Pesachim, 1 week at a time. Today is our 9th lesson, and this week we will be reviewing Daf 53 Nun Gimel through 59 Nun Tet. We will be finishing the 4th chapter and starting the 5th chapter, which I will give an introduction to when we get there. Okay, so let us start with Daf 53, Nun Gimel. We're in the middle of talking about Shemitah and the different laws surrounding the Shemitah year. Again, to remind us, the Shemitah year is the 7th year in Israel. It only applies in Israel. We have, it's the sabbatical year when all produce is considered ownerless. We have a prohibition from working the land, and all produce that is grown on that year is considered ownerless, and therefore anybody who wants to take from the produce in the fields can take it. So first of all, at the top of 53, we're talking about cutting down, right? The Gemara says that we're not allowed to cut down fruit trees during the sabbatical year, during Shemitah, once they start bearing fruit. Again, as I mentioned, we're not allowed to do anything to the trees or to the plants that year. And then the question is, how long can you eat certain fruits that are in the field? So we spoke last week about different regions in Israel and how different regions had different time periods or different seasons for their produce. So here, again, interestingly, instead of the 3 regions that we saw last week, here the Gemara talks about, let's say that you can eat grapes till the vineyards have grapes, and specific areas or specific cities that were known for grapes. Also olives, right? Till there are olives in Tekoa. Interestingly enough, Tekoa is actually about 15-minute drive from my house. It still exists. It's still a city, which is just, I thought, very interesting. Okay, the next bright on the Gemara says, no, it's not about the cities, rather it's about a time period. So you can eat grapes till Pesach, you can eat olives till Shavuot, you can eat figs till Chanukah, you can eat dates till Purim. Rabbi Yochanan switches the last 2, but interestingly enough, it's interesting to think about the harvest of each fruit and when they were still on the trees or when they're in the fields. So I thought that was interesting. The Gemara says, does this contradict what we just said before about places versus time? And the Gemara says, no, it's the same time period, meaning the olives are on the trees in Tekoa, again, which is, by Shavuot, they're still there. So the Gemara puts it together. And then there's, the Gemara then spoke about, if you remember last week, we talked about different regions. So again, the Gemara says that, there's signs for different areas based on what trees grow there, right? The mountains, the valleys have date trees, the Nachal, meaning the riverbeds have reeds, the plain has sycamore. Again, very interesting. Any of you, either if you live in Israel or if you come and visit Israel, you can go to these regions and you will see these trees growing there, which I think is just amazing, right? When you go to the valley, you see the date palms. When you go to the plains, you see the eucalyptus or the sycamore. So it's just a beautiful idea that, again, 2,000 years ago, that's what the Gemara is talking about. And it's literally 2,000 years later, and the same thing is true. So that's just, I think, so beautiful to see. The Gemara then goes on to talk about Bikurim. Again, Bikurim are the first fruit that is formed on the tree, that is brought up to the temple in Jerusalem, and there's a whole ceremony. It is usually brought up on Shavuot, and there was a whole ceremony around them. So Bikurim are brought from the 7 special species that are unique to Israel. And I would just like to say, as a side point, again, as next week is going to be Tu B'Shvat, where we're going to be celebrating the new year for the trees, for the fruit. This is very appropriate. So Tu B'Shvat Sameach, even though it's next week, but we're in Shvat, so we're going to talk about trees, at least for a few more minutes. So again, the Gemara says, again, what are dates? Again, the palms that were found in the valley. What about this, the stream, the riverbed? So the Gemara says we need to know about that, because of the very special law, which is called Egla Arufa. Egla Arufa literally means, the calf that is, we'll call it slaughtered, but it's really like cut. What is this? This is when a person, unfortunately, if a dead body is found in between 2 cities, and they don't know who's responsible or who should have been responsible for this person, and they measure the 2 cities, and if it's equidistant, then we do this ceremony that's called Egla Arufa, where the elders of both cities go down to the river bed, and they bring this calf and they kill it. It's a little bit violent, but the idea is it's meant to shock us, because the idea is it's telling the elders of each city, you are responsible for this person who was killed. Meaning you should have given this person protection. You didn't, so you are somehow being held responsible. Anyway, what's the context? This ceremony is done in a riverbed. It's called a Nachal Eitan. Eitan means strong. So it's in a riverbed. Again, how do you know if it's a riverbed? So the Gemara says if there are reeds growing there, you know that it is a Nachal. You know that it is a riverbed. Okay, from here we're going to go to the Mishnah on 53. To remind us, these Mishnayot are all talking about customs in one place versus the customs in another place. So the custom that we're talking about here is if you live in a place where they sell sheep and goats to non-Jews, then it's okay, you can do that. But if not, that's not the custom of your place, then you cannot. What's the issue? The issue is that if I let you sell these animals to a non-Jew, you might lend them to a non-Jew, and then they're going to work your animals on Shabbat. And we know that is something that we say in Kiddush every week. On Shabbat we say that not only do you need to rest, but your animals need to rest. Right? You're not allowed to work your animals. More than that, no one else is allowed to work your animals. So therefore, we're nervous that you're going to lend your animals to the non-Jew, and then they will work your animals, which is problematic. The other issue we're nervous is that you're going to sell these animals right before Shabbat, and then the non-Jew is going to say, oh, wait, how do I get this animal to move? And it's already going to be Shabbat, and you're going to end up moving the animal, which is one of the actions that is prohibited on Shabbat. It's called mechamer. Mechamer means moving an animal, meaning either dragging it or getting it to move. That is problematic, and therefore we do not want you to sell your animals to non-Jews right before Shabbat. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda says you can sell lame animals, again, animals who are not meant for work, because they're going to just kill it for the meat. So then that's not a problem. Another option is that you can sell, let's say, riding horses, because riding a horse on Shabbat is only rabbinic in origin and not biblical. It's not a biblical prohibition, and therefore it might be okay. Another minhag, another custom was, can you eat roasted meat on Pesach? Again, we're going to see for a long time. We're going to talk about the Paschal lamb, the sacrifice of the Pesach, the Korban Pesach. It was roasted. So the Gemara says that if you're in a place where they roast meat, then you can eat it. But if not, you can't, because it looks like you think that you can do Korban Pesach, which you're not allowed to if there is no temple. And we're going to talk a lot about that sacrifice in a little bit. The Gemara says again, you can't say this meat is for Pesach. Again, it sounds like you're saying it's a korban, it's a sacrifice, so that is problematic. Now we have a story about Todos in Rome who used to eat roasted goats on Pesach. Again, people got upset. It looked like he was doing the Pesach korban, so they got upset. And it seems like he was doing it exactly the way they did it in the time of the temple, and they were upset with him, basically. Okay, so then it says that some people say that Rabbi Shimon said this as opposed to Rabbi Yossi. There's a whole discussion. But then we ask, was Todos good or bad? So they end up saying, no, he was really good because he gave the following, like Dvar Torah. He taught the following. Why did the three prophets, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azaria, give up their lives? These are the three prophets that jumped into the furnace. Don't get nervous. They are saved. They are saved from the furnace, but they jump in. How did they know that they can give up their lives to sanctify the name of God, what we call in Hebrew, Al-Kiddush Hashem? So it says that they learned it from the frogs. Again, this past week's Parsha, the frogs in Egypt, it says that they actually jumped into hot ovens to sanctify God. So they said to themselves, if the frogs can sanctify God by jumping into a furnace, so too we should sanctify our lives by jumping into a furnace, which was very interesting. It seems that Todos also used to give things to the sages or the scholars, either shelter or money. So it seems that he was a good guy. Okay, next Mishnah at the bottom of 53. In a place where they light candles on Yom Kippur in their bedroom, so then you can do that. It's okay. If not, then you shouldn't do it. Again, this custom is dependent on where you live and what the people in the community do. You can light candles, again, before Yom Kippur, in the shul or in public areas. The Gemara explains that this idea of lighting candles or having light on in the bedroom was to prevent people from having relations. Again, one of the prohibitions on Yom Kippur is that you're not allowed to have relations. Therefore, they lit a candle so that they would not have relations in their room. From here, the Gemara talks about making a blessing on the fire after Shabbat, on Motzei Shabbat, again, what we would call the Havdalah ceremony. We make a blessing on the fire. The Gemara explains, why do we do this? Because fire was created on Saturday night, after Shabbat. And then from here we get into I thought it was a great discussion. Daf 54 has a great discussion on all the different things that happened before creation, during creation. So let's go through that. So first, the Gemara says on 54 that we bless the fire on Saturday night after Shabbat. And after Yom Kippur. So interestingly enough, those of you who don't know, there's a special law that when you make Havdalah after Yom Kippur, the candle, the fire that you use, needs to have been lit from before Yom Kippur. So you actually light a 24-hour candle that burns all of Yom Kippur, and you use that light to make a blessing over for Havdalah. The question is why? Again, the Gemara says it needs to be a light that rested over Yom Kippur, again, because of this idea that fire was created then. Again, this idea of resting fire versus new fire. And then the Gemara questions, hold on, fire was created on Saturday night, it was created after Shabbat, but we have a Breita that says that there were 10 things that were created before Shabbat. I didn't write down all the things. Please look it up. It was it's a great list. The rainbow, the fire, all these, a great list of things that were created right before Shabbat. And Rabbi Nehemiah adds that fire was also created before Shabbat. So how can you say that fire was created after Shabbat? So then we get, a few more things are added. The mule, again, a mule is something that cannot reproduce. So it seems that it was a special creation. Rabbi Yoshia adds the ram from Akedat Yitzchak, from the sacrifice of Isaac, the binding of Isaac. That was also created right before Shabbat. Also, the special animal, the worm, that's called the shamir, which they use, apparently this worm, eats through the stone so that we can cut stone for the temple, for the Beit HaMikdash, because we were not allowed to use anything that was hewn with metal, with any metal, utensil. Another idea was that the first pair of tongs was used. This I thought was fascinating, right? Because tongs they use to take something hot out of a furnace, but you can't take out the first thing, because how can you take out the first pair of tongs if you have to make them out of metal? How are you going to take them out of the oven if you don't have tongs to take them out? So they must have been created by God. The Gemara says, no, really you can make a mold and pour in molten metal, and that will create the first tongues, which will then you can create other tongues. I thought it was very interesting. Mate Esther says that she gave this Dvar Torah on Shabbat. Excellent. Okay, so again, so now the Gemara says, oh, it's not a problem. There are different types of fire. Regular fire was created on Saturday night after Shabbat, but the fire of hell, that was created before Shabbat. Then we have a list of things that were created before even the world was created. Again, a fascinating philosophical idea. What does it mean that things were created before the world was created? Many rabbis say, right, that these things are fundamental concepts that needed to exist before the world was created. Again, you can build a whole lesson on these things, but it was interesting. Again, Torah, repentance, the Garden of Eden, hell, right, the temple, Mashiach. I think just a great list of things were created. This is before even creation. And again, here it says that hell was created. How could you say that the fires of hell were created only before Shabbat? Oh, don't worry. Hell was created before the world, but fire in hell was created before Shabbat. Again, I leave you to think about what does that mean, right? What's the point? I think there's a lot to think about, right? The idea of, again, if repentance and hell are created before even the world is created, right? So there's already a mechanism in place for man to, kind of mess up, but come back. I don't know, things you can think about. Okay. Then this says, but hold on, wasn't fire created on the second day? No, again, the fires of hell were created on the second day. It says, right, that's why it doesn't say that the day was good on the second day, right, on Monday. On the second day of creation, it doesn't say ki tov, it was good. The Gemara says because that's the day that the fires of hell were created, so it wasn't such a good day. But no, right, the Gemara says no, the potential for the fire was there, but only the fire was created later on Friday before Shabbat. Okay, again, a lot of things that you can think about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts later on if you'd like. Okay, then the 10 things that were created before Shabbat. These are all, I think, like miraculous things. Again, Aaron's staff, spirits, the garment of Adam, right? These are all different things that were created before Shabbat. Again, this was good, right? The 7 things that are hidden from man, right? From people, right? The day that he's going to die, the day of consolation, the day of judgment. I love this, right? What's in other people's minds, right? God does not let us know what's in other people's minds. Next time you try to use telepathy to your children or to your friends, right? Don't bother. The Gemara says they're never going to know it. You're never going to know when Mashiach is going to come. Anyway, it was such a good daf. Okay. 3 things that Hashem thought about creating, right? That a dead body should decompose, right? That food should rot. Again, fascinating ideas. Like you would think, why do we need this? And the Gemara gives you reasons, right? If a dead body didn't compose, you might not let go, right? You might keep that person there in front of you all the time, right? I thought just very fascinating things. Okay. From here we get into a whole discussion about, different fast days and different customs for each type of fast day. So maybe I'll just give an overview, right? We have Tisha B'Av, again, the 9th of Av, a very sad day in Jewish history. We commemorate the destruction of the temple. We have what's called in the Gemara a Ta'anit Sibur. Ta'anit Sibur is a communal fast. These are fast days that were made or instituted for days, fast days for when there was no rain in Israel. So that's what's called a Ta'anit Sibur. When we get to, there's a whole Masechet called Masechet Ta'anit that talks about this. They would institute fast days in order to pray for rain. It was very serious and in varying degrees of seriousness. And then we have Yom Kippur. So basically the rest of 54 compares these 3 fast days in different ways, right? Do you work? When do you eat? Right? Does it start in the morning? Does it start the night before? What prayers are said in each one of these days? Who needs to fast? Again, pregnant women and nursing women need to fast on both of these, like Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. Again, there's no Ne'ilah, the special prayer that we say on Yom Kippur. We say it on Yom Kippur. We don't say it on Tisha B'Av. But let's say on a Ta'anit Sibur, on the fast for rain, we have 24 blessings in the silent Amida as opposed to 18, where we don't have that, right, on Tisha B'Av. So again, different customs on different types of, on different days. On 55, it talks about that learned people shouldn't work on Erev, on the day before, prior to Tisha B'Av. And then the Gemara says, well, aren't we afraid that it looks like haughtiness? Right, that the sage says, oh, I'm not going to work, I'm smart and I need to study. Right, and the Gemara says, no, well, it's not so clear that people will see, or know why the person is working or not. Here we get into the idea that a groom, does not need to say Shema on his wedding night. Again, the Gemara talks about this idea that he's going to be so preoccupied with the marital act that is coming that night, he's not going to be able to focus on saying Shema. He won't have the proper kavanah, the proper intent. And therefore, the question is it considered haughtiness or not? So that was just, I thought, a very interesting discussion. Okay, the next Mishnah, again, talking about different customs. Now we have, again, different regions. The Galil, the north of Israel, versus Yehuda, Judah, that's in the south of Israel. So the Mishnah on 55 says that in Yehuda, they do work on Erev Pesach, on the day of Pesach, again, the morning. In the Galil, they don't. Again, the night before, when they do B'dikat Chametz, when they're checking for the Chametz, Beit Shammai says you shouldn't work. Sorry. Beit Hillel says you can work all night, just in the morning you shouldn't be working. Again, the Gemara asks, is this a custom, a minhag, or is this the law, right? Is it asur? Is it prohibited? And that is a machloket. The next idea is the Gemara says that if you're weeding your field on the 13th of Nisan, and you by accident pull out a grain, right? You pull out the wheat. Now you didn't mean to pull out the wheat. So the Gemara says quickly put it back into moist earth so that it will take root quickly. And then remember we learned that the korban, the sacrifice of the omer, which is brought on the second day of Pesach, that is going to let you eat all of the grain that was planted before Pesach. So we want to make sure that this grain takes root before the second day of Pesach. So again, the Gemara discusses, can we prove from here that you're not allowed to work on the 14th? Because again, this is on the 13th, so you put it in, and then you have the 14th, the 15th, and the 16th. Here the Gemara mentions a concept I just want to bring up, which is called miktzat yom kekulo, which means part of a day is counted like a day. So if, let's say, you do something at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, according to Jewish law, it's as if it was there for the whole day, right? Even though it was only partially there that day, it counts as the whole day. So the Gemara says that works. You can only do that like once, but not twice. Okay. The next Mishnah talks about different types of work that are allowed to be done on the 14th, again, on Erev Pesach. Sorry. The Mishnah says that work started before the 14th. You can finish it on the 14th, right? So if you started it before, you can finish it. But you can't start it on the 14th, right? Don't start a new project on the 14th because, again, you only have half a day to work, and we're scared you're going to continue working into the afternoon when you're not allowed to be working. The sages say that there are 3 types of work that can be done on the 14th. These are the tailors, the barbers, and the launderers, right? You can do laundry, Erev Pesach, because again, you want to make sure all of these things are done. You can give your kids haircuts. They also add maybe shoemakers. You want to make sure you have shoes. So the Gemara asks, what type of work is being done, right? Is it work that needs to be done for the festival, meaning I want to wash my Shabbos clothes, my special clothes for the festival, because I want to make sure I look good? Or is it doesn't matter, I can do anything? So that's really a machloket in the Gemara. And the end, it says, no, it seems to be things that you need for the festival, and again, only to finish it. You can't start a new project, even if it's something small. The Gemara explains it's not why we need these 3 types of work, rather why these 3 types of work would be permitted. And for each one, the Gemara says that for other people, it would be permitted even on the festival. I don't mean on the festival itself, but on Chol HaMoed, on the intermediate days. And therefore, because it would be okay on the intermediate days, we're going to let you do it on Erev Pesach, right, on the day before Pesach. So the Gemara says, right, a tailor is okay because regular people can sew in the middle of the week, meaning in Chol HaMoed. Barbers and launderers is also okay because people who got out of jail or who just arrived right before the festival, they can do these things again on Chol HaMoed, on the intermediate days, and therefore you can do it. Again, shoemakers, I thought this was again very nice. The Olei Regel, the people who come to Jerusalem for the festival, again, they just walked very far. They're allowed to fix their shoes again in the intermediate days of the festival. Therefore, we're going to let the shoemakers be open even Erev Pesach, right? Even before the festival. Okay, and the next Mishnah you can put eggs under hens on the 14th, again, to like incubate the eggs. We want to make sure, true, you can't, right, Mata Esther adds, you can't launder on the intermediate days, but again, here we're talking about necessities. We're talking about people who couldn't have done their laundry beforehand, then they are allowed, and therefore it would be okay. Yes, so excellent point. Again, here we're talking about incubating eggs. The Gemara says that as long as the egg was there for 3 days, meaning the heat of the chicken is still on the egg, or I don't know, the egg itself is warm, or maybe the chicken is warm, but either way, if it's been 3 days that the egg was on it, so the hen was on the egg, you can replace that chicken. Again, the Gemara says we don't want you to lose a lot of money. Maybe it's okay for you to lose a little money. It also says that you can kind of sweep the dung out from the animals. You can also return the utensils to the craftsmen. We're nervous that they might get stolen. Okay, the next Mishnah at the bottom of 55 leads us to a discussion about the people of Jericho, the people who lived in Yericho. Apparently, they did 6 things. 3 of them, the sages didn't make a big deal about. They let them do it. 3 of them, the sages said, this is not okay. So what are these things? The Gemara says the 3 things that the sages let them do, even though they were slightly problematic. One is grafting the palm trees. Again, a beautiful thought. Anybody who's been to Israel, if you ever drive around Jericho, which is anywhere like around the Dead Sea, you see hundreds and hundreds of palm trees. So it's beautiful that already in the time of the Mishnah, right, they are planting palm trees in that region. So again, I think it's so cool. Okay, so they would graft palm trees on the 14th. They would wrap Shema. We'll see what that means in a minute. And they would harvest and pile the grain before the sacrifice of the Omer. Again, we said you shouldn't really do that. Or we really said that harvesting is okay, but piling isn't okay. Okay, problematic. Then the 3 things that the sages protested, meaning they said, you've gone too far. What are those 3 things? They allowed the branches, they allowed people to use branches that were sanctified, that were hekdesh, which you are in general not allowed to use for personal benefit. They allowed them to eat dates that fell on Shabbat, and they left pe'ah from the vegetables. The word pe'ah means the corners, and this was a type of charity that you needed to leave the corners of each field for the poor people. This was usually done from grain. It was not done from vegetables. We'll see what the issue is in a minute, right? You might say, hold on, they're giving more charity. Why does it matter? We're going to see that it is a little bit problematic. Okay, we're now at the top of 56. Since we're talking about 6 things, 3 good things, 3 bad, right? The Gemara is like, oh, that reminds us. Chizkiyahu HaMelech, the king Chizkiyahu, did 6 things. 3 things were good and 3 things were bad. You can look in the Gemara what those things were. Very interesting things that he did. So you can see that on 56. Okay, back to the people of Yericho, of Jericho. They grafted the date trees. What would they do? They would inject some sort of like mixture into the heart of the palm, and that would strengthen the palm. Or they really did graft it. There's like a machloket. Now, what does it mean that they wrapped Shema? So there are different opinions of what this means. It seems to mean they didn't make a break or a separation between one part and another. So maybe it was between Shema and the next paragraph, which is Va'ahavta. The other is maybe they didn't say Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, right? That line. that we say in between Shema and Vahafta, right? The verse that we say very quietly, and a beautiful, if anybody needs a nice Dvar Torah, right? It's from a few parshas ago, but the Gemara says that this was actually a discussion between Yaakov and his children. Why? Yaakov wanted to tell his children when Moshiach is going to come, but then he got nervous that maybe they didn't believe in God, maybe there was somebody who didn't belong, and the children said, right, Shema Yisrael, right? Again, we normally think of Yisrael as in Israel, the nation, but here they mean Israel, the person, right? Jacob's other name, Yaakov's other name is Yisrael. So they're saying, listen, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, meaning, Yaakov, we believe in God, don't worry, we all believe in God. And then what does Yaakov say? Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto Olam Vaed, right? Praise be God, right, that you believe in God. Then the Gemara says, well, hold on. This is not a verse, right? Moshe didn't say it. It's not in Chumash. So maybe we shouldn't say it, but Yaakov said it. So maybe we should say it. And therefore, did you ever wonder why we say it quietly? Right? So the Gemara says we say it quietly because Shema and Vahafta are both verses in the Bible. Baruch Shem is not. So we say quietly. Interestingly enough, on Yom Kippur, once a year, we say it very loud, right? So again, because we believe in God. Okay, that was just a nice Dvar Torah. Back to our people of Jericho. Again, what was this idea about the sanctified trees? It seems that their parents' generation sanctified the trees, or even earlier, and they were using what grew from them, right? Because they thought anything that grows from something sanctified is not sanctified. But the sages say, no, it is. You can't use it. It seems they also broke fences so that the poor people can take food on Shabbat. But again, we're nervous about carrying on Shabbat. We're nervous about them. Again, they let them take dates that fell from the upper branches on Shabbat. We're nervous that maybe they'll climb the trees. Okay, I thought it was very interesting. What was the issue about again leaving the charity for the poor people in the vegetable patch? So the Gemara explains that in regular payah, meaning anything that needs payah, meaning from your grain field, if you leave the corners for the poor people can eat it without separating the tithes, right? Trumot, maaser, they don't have to give any other gifts, right? This is just pure charity. But vegetables, because they are not required in payah, they are required in tithes, meaning maaser, and the poor people would need to give maaser, and that would be a problem because now you're making the poor people give up, right, some of their food, and they're not going to know, and they're going to get in trouble. Anyway, the sages said, please don't do this. Okay, from here, the Gemara on 57 talks about the hides that were collected in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, and how they were distributed to all the priests who were working that day. But it seems that there were either some corrupt priests or some very bullying priests, and they would take all the hides for themselves, and therefore they would just distribute it at the end of the week. And then the Gemara talks about people who basically misuse their power, and all of these high priests were basically corrupt, and it was pretty sad and terrible. And then the Gemara ends with this idea that there were 4 cries from the temple. 2 were sad and 2 were happy. And then the last thing they were talking about is, again, another Kohen who would, excuse me? Sorry. This, one of the priests who is named Yisachar, he would eat all the leftover meat in the korbanot, and the king would ask him, which meat is better because you were you were in the temple and you ate all this meat, but he didn't fear the king, and he ends up, I don't know, it's a very bad story. He loses both his hands. And in the end, the Torah says that basically lamb and goat meat are equal. And with that, we end the fourth chapter. I agree, Lynn, that this discussion of bullying was very disarming. Yes, I agree with you. It really does explain, what they talk about, that before the destruction of the temple, people are so, I would say, so corrupt that even the leadership, right, and even the people who you look to for guidance, they were also so corrupt, and that is very sad, and we hope to merit much more righteous leaders in our day. Okay, with that, we finish basically the first section of Pesachim. We talked about, just to remind ourselves, we talked about checking for chametz, what is chametz, how we're making matzah, how we're getting ready for Pesach. That was the four first chapters of Pesachim. We are now going to go into a lengthy discussion about the sacrifice of the Pesach. For those of you who are familiar with the sacrifices, so what I'm going to try to do is give an introduction based on whatever topic we're going to talk about. There are a lot of introductions out there that you can see that give you an introduction to the entire rest of the Masechet. I think I'm going to do it week by week, whatever topic we're going to talk about. I'll give you an introduction to those concepts. So we are now going into the world of the temple, of the sacrifices. We're going to learn a lot of details that I think on one hand, one can say this is really not relevant to today. On the other hand, I think, first of all, it's just fascinating to understand what it was like 2,000 years ago on Pesach, right? We're all very familiar of what Pesach looks like today, but to recognize that for hundreds of years, Pesach looked completely different. So I think, first of all, this is going to give us an insight into a world that we really are not so familiar with. That's number one. Number two, this week's Parsha, we're going to learn about what the Jews did in Egypt. That's going to be the basis for a lot of what we're going to learn about for the next few months. Okay, let's go. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to write in the chat. Just a few introductions. One, we're going to talk about on this daf on 58, the hours of the day. We have mentioned this before, but the idea is that, wait one second. Yes, okay. The hours of the day are important to recognize that we're talking about what's called sha'ot zmaniyot in Hebrew, which means a halachic hour. What does that mean? Every day, we're used to the watch, right? You wake up at 6, at 7, whatever, right? Everything is very consistent. In Jewish law, the day is based on sunrise and sunset. We take the time from sunrise to sunset. We divide that by 12, meaning every daytime is 12 hours, every nighttime is 12 hours. We take the day, divide it by 12, and that gives you how many minutes are in every hour. Again, we're normally used to a 60-minute hour. In the Jewish law, that is only the case, right, like twice a year in the equinox, when 6 o'clock in the morning is sunrise and 6 o'clock p.m. is sunset. That's the only time that you're going to have a 60-minute hour in the Jewish law. And therefore, it's interesting. If anybody's interested, you can look up. There are what's called zmanim calendars, which will tell you every day when is halachic sunrise, meaning when the sun comes up, when is sunset. and right, the time for everything in the day. So we are going to discuss in this daf the hours, right? So just to remind you, 0 is sunrise, right? The first hour is going to be when it's sunrise, and 12 o'clock, right, is going to be sunset, right? So again, 0 to 12, sunrise to sunset. The 6th hour is noon, okay? So anything 1 through 6 is morning, 6 through 12 is afternoon. So just to give us an idea of what the hours are. I made you a little chart for this daf because there are a lot of numbers that get thrown around. So sometimes I think it's more about not so much about the time, more about earlier versus later. So that's what we're going to discuss right now on 58. Okay. Another concept, the sacrifice that's called the Tamid sacrifice, I don't know what it's called in English, the daily sacrifice, I guess. It was brought consistently twice a day. There is a tamid in the morning. We daven shacharit. Our morning prayers are to represent this sacrifice, the morning sacrifice. It was also brought in the afternoon, the tamid of the afternoon. That is our mincha prayer, our afternoon prayer. So just to recognize that our prayers, we did this in Masechet Brachot, right? Are our prayers connected to the sacrifices or to the forefathers? Anyway, the timing is the sacrifice. So we have the Korban Tamid. It's brought twice a day. We're going to learn, I'm just going to give you the fine print, the quick version. We're going to learn that the Korban Tamid in the morning is the first sacrifice of the day. Nothing is brought before that. And the Tamid of the afternoon is the last sacrifice of the day, except the Pesach, except for the Passover sacrifice. That is the only sacrifice that's brought in the afternoon. Those are all the things you need to know before we start Daf 58. Okay, Daf 58. The Tamid is slaughtered on the 8.5 hour, right? And sacrifice on the 9.5 hours. Again, there was slaughtering, and then sacrifice means it was put up on the altar. We're going to talk a lot about what gets done, what's the process. We'll talk about that next week, probably. Okay, but on Erev Pesach, as you can see here, on Erev Pesach, we're going to do the Korban Tamid, the sacrifice, an hour early to give us time to bring the Passover sacrifice. If it fell out on a Friday, so then on Friday we're going to move it to 6.5 hours. I should have put that here, sorry. So Friday is going to be 6.5. Okay, now, where do we learn this from? This is a very famous verse in the Bible. I guess it's really famous in my neighborhood because the rabbi of our yeshiva gave a beautiful Dvar Torah about this pasuk. The verse says, Et hakeves ha'achad. Basically, every day you need to bring a sacrifice in the morning, and every day you bring a sacrifice in the afternoon. And Rav Amital, who was the rabbi in my neighborhood, unfortunately he passed away already 10 years ago, but he says this is the most important verse in the Bible because it teaches us about consistency, that he talked about Judaism being about committing to God on a consistent daily basis. Every day, no matter what you feel, no matter what you're doing, you needed to bring the daily sacrifice. So I think it's just a beautiful idea, even though you look at this verse and you're like, okay, they brought a sacrifice. But he says, right, it's something about consistency, right? Judaism is about, right, every day we should be, right, consistent in our Judaism. So I think that's just a beautiful, another Dvar Torah. Okay, you have a lot of Dvar Torahs this week. Again, we have to bring this sacrifice every day. Again, as I mentioned, there are the hours that we're going to bring. Again, our question is going to be, what is the optimal time to bring the daily tamid? One option is, again, as we said here, 8.5. We only move it because of Pesach. The other option is no. The optimal time to bring it is at 6.5, right? Meaning as soon afternoon, right? Again, we forget, what does it mean? Afternoon. What's the first time that is afternoon? 6.5. Remember, if we said noon is at 6, again, I mean the 6th hour of the day. So 6.5 hours of the day would be called afternoon. So the Gemara says maybe that's really the best time to bring the daily tamid. However, remember we said it needs to be the last sacrifice of the day, and people are still bringing their personal sacrifices throughout the afternoon. Therefore, we push it up till 8.5. However, let's say on Shabbat, where we're going to see on Shabbat you don't bring personal sacrifices. That's another side point. On Shabbat you do not bring personal sacrifices. You only bring communal sacrifices. Therefore, the Korban Tamid maybe should be brought at 6.5. That's going to be, you can look here on the chart. We have a three-way disagreement on what we should do on again, these are hours of the Tamid, when we should bring them on Erev Pesach, on Erev Pesach, should it be 7.5 or maybe 6.5, again, or 8.5 and 7.5, right? Again, I think it's less about the numbers, more about what we are more concerned about, right? So one issue is, are we concerned about, again, what's unique about Shabbat? They brought a special sacrifice called the Musaf, right? The added offering. That is why we have the prayer that's called the Musaf prayer on Shabbat. That again makes our tamid either later or earlier. We have an issue of meat spoiling. Again, the Gemara explains that you are allowed to sacrifice the Pesach offering on Shabbat, but you're not allowed to roast it on Shabbat. Because again, you're not allowed to cook on Shabbat. Therefore, you needed to wait till after Shabbat to roast your meat. Therefore, maybe we should push it off as late as possible. So that is the discussion on 58. On 59, again, as I mentioned, the Korban Tamid is the last sacrifice that was brought, of course, except for the Pesach offering. The Gemara adds on 59 that they also, after the Pesach offering, they also burnt the incense. Again, that was burnt on the gold altar that's inside the temple. Then they would also light the lamp. The Gemara explains that these things are done at the very, very end of the day. Again, lighting the lamp was done by the high priest. And that was the very last thing that was done because the lamp, the menorah, needed to be lit from the night, right, from sunset all the way till the next morning. So that was the last thing that was done. Then there's a discussion, maybe the lamp should come before the Korban of the Pesach, maybe it's afterwards. So again, a very lengthy discussion of what is the order. Another thing that was mentioned here was another concept. We have mentioned this before, but I'll just remind you. The concept of a person who's called Mechusar Kippurim, someone who is lacking in atonement. What does that mean? Certain people had a lengthy atonement process. They would have to go to the mikvah. Then the next day, they would have to bring a sacrifice. And only then would they be able to eat from the sacrificial meat. And here, the Gemara says that we want to make sure that these people can eat their Pesach, and therefore they could bring one of their offerings maybe even after the Tamid. Remember, again, we said the Tamid is the last thing, but maybe we make a special dispensation for those people. Again, we have the last thing on this daf is a discussion about burning the fats at night. That's another idea. First of all, sacrifices were brought during the day. Interestingly enough, just another quick point, we're very used to saying that in the Jewish law, the Jewish day starts at night, right, and then goes into the next day, right? Right, if something is Rosh Chodesh, Shabbat, we always start that night, the night before, and then we go into the day. Interestingly enough, the day in the temple, the day started in the daytime, meaning the work of the temple was from sunrise to sunset. After that, any meat that was that needed to be burnt and wasn't burnt that day was allowed to be burnt overnight that next night. So that's just an interesting concept, that the concept of day is a little bit different in the temple. The other is that all of these the avodot, the work done in the temple is done during the day. Right, you slaughter the animals, you burn the whatever meat needs to be done. What was done at night, you were allowed to put, or you needed to put, the fats onto the altar, onto the mizbeach, and those fats would burn overnight. Interestingly, that's our Mariv tefillah, right? That is our evening prayer. It is I guess it commemorates those fats that were burning all night in the temple, which is why you can actually daven all night, right? The evening prayer can be done all night. So that is things that I think we're gonna leave off here, because then the last thing we're gonna discuss next week, because it's a whole new topic. So I would like to wish everyone a great week. A Shavua Tov, a Shabbat Shalom. Don't worry if things are a little complicated. It is a whole new world that we're going to be exposed to. But I find it fascinating, and I think there are a lot of things that we're going to learn. If anybody is vegan or vegetarian, this might be a little bit more challenging, but you can hold like a Rav Kook. I don't know if you are familiar with, but Rav Kook actually says that when the third temple will be built, we will only have plant-based sacrifices. He thinks that meat sacrifices was something, right? Animal sacrifices was something of the past, and therefore, because it was right, what was going on in the culture of the time, that was something that we did. Nowadays, we're much more, I guess, eco-friendly, animal-friendly. So Rav Kook really believes that in the third temple there will only be plant-based sacrifices. I don't know, who knows? So looking forward to learning with you, and have a great week, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.